Alright, so I want to welcome you guys back. This topic is on the differences between male and female leadership, and everything spawned off of this one question that popped up during Bible study back roughly around in 2022 once COVID restrictions were lifted. So there's male role models in leadership here, and there's great men in the Bible, but aren't there any great women of the Bible as well? So I asked this at the Bible study group, and the men just looked around nervously and then chuckled a couple times, then just went right on ahead with whatever they were talking about. No one actually paid any attention to the question, and if there was anything, it was just one or two sentences ending with, well, it's a good question, and that's about it. Yeah, that was just a dead end right there. However, I want to say that for the most part, I understand and recognize that in the biblical times, women had a very supportive role for the most part. Queen Esther is one of the very few, as well as Miriam during Moses' time. Those two had a very much leadership position because they were placed into it. Now, the other women who had a bit of a, how do I put it, profession, a questionable profession, if at best, because some women were not even described as far as what they did or what they were doing. But some were escorts. In the case of Jericho, the woman who let down the two spies through the hole in the wall was an escort, and she had found favor with God along with her family, which is interesting when you think about it, just because they were all within a city and an entire family had come to know God, or at least to believe in the Israel's God anyway. So I want to say that when it comes down to leadership, I think everything is tied down to responsibility, which seems to be very much lost in today's culture. So back then, if my understanding is correct, those who had all the responsibility also had all the rewards, so to speak. They had the most risk, and the majority seemed to have a family or loved ones of some kind that they would end up sharing the reward with. It seemed like very few ended up holding on to the reward. So being blessed then, because of the responsibilities and the risks and everything else, they would end up passing off to others. I want to say that when it comes down to women, the Bible does talk clearly as far as what a good woman is. Proverbs, Song of Solomon's, especially Ecclesiastes, or rather just the last two, Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon's, where it talks about lovers and it talks about women, and Proverbs gives some good thoughts on both women as well as wanting peace and quiet in your home. Now, the fact that Solomon may have been married up to over 400 women does actually make sense when he talks about having peace and quiet in his home. You have that many women under one roof, you are not going to have a quiet evening or a quiet life. Yeah, it's funny when you think back as far as conversations that were had. All right, moving on. So breaking down the characteristics and the traits and all of that, you want to start with men and then go with women just to understand what the differences are. There are more, but I am trying to stick to the major ones. There's always these different roles and categories you can put others in. It's quite unbelievable how far you can go. For men, I want to say there are some things that apply to women as well. The supernatural versus the natural. So let's start there. The natural man is born with a hard heart that is not open or receptive to God and to what is spiritual. Some men actually outright do not see the spiritual world for whatever reason, whether they refuse to acknowledge it or refuse to accept it, or just simply cannot accept what they do not see. That is understandable, and that is also very personal, up to each and every individual. The natural man is at odds with the spiritual man due to differing values, views, understanding, and foundations with which everything is built off of. The minds and hearts are locked, but may be unlocked or made receptive till they are unlocked. Trauma and tragedy are one of those, and loss are some of the ones that help others understand just what all had happened and to better understand what's going on. It seems that men have a better understanding, a better grip of this than women. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but when it comes down to leadership roles, it is a bad thing if you cannot see a couple of steps ahead at the very, very minimum. Not just simply having vision and being able to plan out what you, your family, or your church, or whoever is underneath you, if you are in a leadership position. Being able to see ahead is one of those marks of a good leader. So, when it comes down to it, the natural man is very physical. Now, moving on, Proverbs 23:7, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 27:19, as in water face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man. And Isaiah 6:9-10, tell my people this, though you hear my words repeatedly, you won't understand them. Though you watch and watch as I perform miracles, still you won't know what they mean. Dull their understanding, close their ears, and shut their eyes. I don't want them to see or to hear or to understand or to turn to me to heal them. That is something that is still up for speculation, but in short, I think a lot falls back on what do you care about and what are you chasing after? The natural man he goes in a very different direction than the one who is religious and spiritual. They both care about different things, they see different things, they focus on different things, and they go different directions. This is not necessarily wrong or right, but if you choose to not pursue any sort of a relationship or any sort of a religion at all, I say that because I don't consider Christianity to be a religion, so as much as it is a relationship. So if you choose to go be more physical than spiritual, there is a lot that you're going to miss out on. Now, when it comes down to leadership, if you're approached with a whole bunch of questions about what this is and why and all of that, it's something that you're going to have to find a couple of answers to, or else you're going to have to just explain that that's not something you know and possibly risk embarrassment depending upon what your leadership position is. So I want to say that by starting off here with pointing out the differences between the natural and the supernatural, the religious and the physical, you're understanding that, well, women are the same way, in short. However, that is a little bit more unclear to me simply because I'm a man and there's certain things that I simply will not be able to understand or to see. I can and look into certain aspects and questions, but ultimately, when it comes down to the two, this is a very difficult question to find answers to, simply because there is a very lack of there's a lack of information out there. I don't believe there's any studies on this either. Now, maybe that's fine. There are plenty of other good examples and bad examples of female leadership. Now, in today's world, with the army and the military and all that, it seems like there's a lot that is being addressed that is much needed, because abuse and sexual assault and all that is something that happens in the military. It needs to be called out. So when there is abuse there with male leadership, it's something that can be swept under the rug and can be passed along without ever being dealt with. I've heard of that in the military. I don't know if there's one branch in the military that is worse than the other when it comes down to sexual assaults and all that, but either way, in that sense, it is good to have female leadership to have a healthy mix or balance. However, keep in mind, this is the military. People are here to defend their country and to learn how to, essentially, they're being broken and learn how to take other lives. So women should, I do not believe women have the capacity to be broken and still come out the same way or still be as effective as men in that regards. Just because being able to take a life is something that it's going to stick with you for the rest of your life if you're able to go ahead and do that. If not, you should not be there, because indecision will be costly, if not just outright take your life. So make a bad decision, make a decision, but do not stand there and not make a decision at all. Indecision is the worst. So when it comes down to it, there is a lot when it comes down to the military with the Israelites and that in the Bible, but it's not specifically talked about simply because the tactics were usually handled by God, and he would actually talk to leaders and go tell them how to go handle things. Look at Jericho with what God told them and how to handle it. King Saul lost favor with God simply because he took matters in his own hands, and he was basically rebellious. He didn't listen. Actually, I think it was credited him as being disobedient, not rebellious. Let me take that back. There's other leaders out there who basically did not follow, and those who did follow, and it actually showed as far as in 1 Kings and 2 Kings, even in a couple parts in Judges. So having male leadership is good, but, well, in today's world, since men and women are equal, the leadership here can be examined under different lenses. However, there's still very little that's actually talked about with the actual differences between male and female leadership. But by breaking it down between those who are physical and those who are religious, you can start to see more of a pattern. Now, I can't speak for other religions in this particular case, but caring about the God who you believe in and serve and worship, there are certain characteristics and qualities that overlap between men and women that will not overlap or be clearly shown in those who are physical. So you could talk about religious traits versus masculine or feminine traits. So I want to start with the religious side here first. Putting faith, belief, values, morals, ethics first, being faithful or showing that you were faithful, dependable, having kindness, moral integrity, which is basically doing what you believe to be the right thing, even if no one else is looking. Fatherliness or motherliness, which is defined as patience and caring and the desire to be either a dad or a mom. Pure-hearted, which can be defined a few different ways, but in short, you are striving to do what is right and to avoid what is wrong. To care and having a maturity to the point where you can spiritually discern what is and what is not, and what you should try to stay from, or to keep others away from. This matters most if you're a parent or having those underneath you. So I am lumping religious and biblical and moral qualities all together here just to keep it simple. Again, this is a much more deep topic than I originally thought. So in a sense, when I pursue this question, I open up just a large can of worms. There's just too much here. You can just keep going on and on and on. Yeah. But I'm not trying to take more than 20 minutes if at all possible. So as far as the masculine and feminine traits here, I'll go over those real quickly, starting with masculine traits. Traits traditionally viewed as masculine in Western society include strength, courage, independence, leadership, and assertiveness. The five characteristics commonly attributed to men are ambition, pride, honor, competitiveness, and a sense of adventure. Being number one, being the best, and to be able to crush your competition is something that is built into men from what I understand. This will not be carried over to every single man, because every single man will hit a wall in his life. For women, I think it's a little differently. I don't think they hit the same walls as men do. Anyway, these are still very much important because they define what masculine and what men are. Now, I want to point out here, this is a small point here, but there's a difference between men and males, as in, like, every man is a male, but not every male is a man. It all depends upon if they have the inflexibility, if they have the signs, if they have the telltales between that men have that boys do not have. Knowing their foundation, where they come from, being able to answer these difficult questions, and being able to make some of the hard choices, showing mastery, proficiency, and strength, being tenacious, and showing that they're more logical, independent, physically stronger, is one of the signs that men have over boys. Now, men, I believe, are built a certain way so that they are normally physically stronger than women. So the idea of being able to protect your family, your wife, your kids, and all of that is tied to the responsibility of a man. Not every man will have a family, so this will not apply. But for those it does, it's something to think about, just because having something in your life other than you to care about, whether you like it or not, is a very real responsibility. And it will make or break men. In fact, in a very real sense, this needs to happen, because drawing attention away from yourself to those in your life is incredibly important. There are issues and problems that you as a man should solve, should fix. Men are also those who like to repair. This is something that's built into them for the most part as well. I think it's a minor aspect, and you could definitely talk about this for quite some time on what that looks like. Leadership itself doesn't have to be gentle and doesn't have to be kind, but it could be like boundaries, in the sense where you just set up boundaries, you set up rules, you do this, you do that, and you don't have to necessarily be kind about it, but as long as something is there, you can and should be respected for it. You're setting up boundaries for your family. This is incredibly important and needed now more than ever, simply because technology is changing. The internet is here. Being online and having a virtual life, rather than just simply being completely offline, it's there and it needs to be managed. There's a lot more that needs to be managed as well, and having kids and all that, it forces men to step up or to simply take off. So you know what kind of a person if you just simply are constantly running from all of this. And the women do too. I want to say that there's a lot more here, but I'm going to continue and go ahead with this. Now, when it comes down to it, for women, this is a lot more complicated. Just because, as what I said, I am a man, I do not have a woman's perspective. I can understand certain things, and I've looked up certain things, and I've heard plenty of stories. You don't want to take the minority and make it be, base everything else off of it, because that's just not right, and you could actually cause a lot more issues by saying, this is what a few of these people do, when in reality, that is the exception, not the rule. You know what? I actually forgot something. Let me take a step back before I talk about women. The natural man is born with a hard heart that is not open and receptive to God and to what is spiritual. Now, some people want to say this is the third eye, this is their third eye, but that's a little bit off. Just because I believe that magic and what is religious shares the same space does not mean that they are the same thing. However, that is still up for speculation. Speculation and debate. That is something that I hope to discuss in another video. But overall, I have to add those two because those two are not... They may be synonymous, but they're not the same thing. The natural man is also at odds with the spiritual man due to differing values, views, understanding. Yeah, okay, I said that. So the minds and hearts are locked. Yep, I said that as well. So overall, I forgot about that simply because men will choose what they are going to be receptive to. Now, this is going to be to differing. This is going to be. This is something that's not going to be clear, but it does need to be acknowledged, especially if you're going to be a leader. All right. So for women. Oh, hold on. Okay, there's one more part here that I forgot to read about. Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 3:14 through 15. Thus, Paul makes a distinct differentiation between those in Christ and those without Christ. To this day, the same veil remains when the old covenant is read. It has not been removed, but because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, the book of Moses read, a veil covers their hearts, but whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. So, this passage, and there's a couple passages like this, the understanding there is, even if those are pursuing and questioning and just being very critical when it comes down to God, they're going to get answers because they're looking for answers. Those who don't search at all don't really get anything. Now, there may be a calling in their life where God sees something and he wants them to go do something, but he will not directly intervene there. In a sense, those who are in a leadership position, they undergo a lot more rigorous training and discipline, so to speak, because a leader is someone who has to learn a lot more than the audience he is teaching or she is teaching. I have talked to quite a few, including some family members who have been in leadership positions, and it's humbling, it's interesting, and there's a lot there. And I mean, a leader almost has to learn twice as much as what he's capable of teaching, or she. I want to say that overall this applies no matter what day and age you're talking about, simply because so much changes and people are going to be very different regardless if technology is involved or not. Not everything, the further back you go, the less there is that is aware of the other side issues and all of that, so there's probably less information out there anyway. That actually makes it more simple and easy to understand just because there's less involved. When it comes down to women, I've been able to divide it into basically feminine traits and other traits, qualities, and characteristics and marks. The feminine versus everything else is simple. It's their nature. Women, I believe, are designed, according to the Bible, are designed to be helpers. And so there is a certain femininity there where it is natural, so to speak. Now, I believe, this applies to both men and women here, but I believe in duality in the sense that men and women are born physically alive but spiritually dead. So, in that sense, I believe women are affected more than men in this simply because of how they operate and what their strengths are. This is not a bad thing because women are more social and they're more focused on the family and basically the community in some cases. I think there's a lot to talk about there with, community and family and the differences there, but I'm only going to just be mentioning it here and that's it. The thing is, feminine traits isn't just simply about outward beauty and appearance and being able to take care of themselves and all that. There's a lot more of an emotional side to that. More emotional, more soft, more compassionate, cares more, and is open more than men for the most part. Is diligent, is dedicated, or more receptive to her family needs, or, as I say, community, and above all, possesses the primary characteristics of biblical wisdom, the fear of the Lord, and is also virtuous. Now, for those who are outside of Christianity, you want to take the good qualities and characteristics that are talked about, and you can just replace that, with what you believe. Either way, having a woman who fears who she believes is something to be respected and to cherish, because you will not find that in any other woman who is not like that. I want to say that you could divide the feminine nature just like you can with the masculine nature as far as what do they focus on and all of that. Like, is there a religious side? Is there Is there a side involving God and faith? Or is there a complete lack of that? So, being able to be receptive and understand the differences between the different types of women and men out there it's not that important, to be honest. But what is important is if you want to be a leader, if you want to be acknowledged and to be listened to, there are certain steps that you have to take and that you have to be aware of. The cost is greater to be in any sort of leadership position, and if you don't meet the requirements, you are simply going to be asked to step down or be removed. It's really that plain and simple. Because here's the thing, you're not being a leader for yourself, you're being a leader for others. This is about others, not yourself. That's why that's important to get this stuff right. Yeah, now you can add your own thoughts and understanding to a lot of this, sure. I want to say that this touches upon a very minor part here, but if you do not apply something because you care about others, and the Bible does say that if you don't do things because you love the other person or because you're doing it without love, you are nothing but a useless noise. However, that's a very, very small part here. I'm thinking when it comes down to it, how you work with others, how you interact with others, and all of that matters, but should be its own entire video, simply because the way everyone interacts with each other, men and women, it's too long to go in lengths describing in this particular segment here. But it is important, from what I understand, to acknowledge it, because there is a lot that is tied to it. Now, there's other parts that are questionable here, but I pulled some interesting things as far as other marks, qualities, traits, and characteristics of women. Women are more prepared for the immediate future rather than the far distant one. I don't know if planning itself is tied in with men or women specifically. I don't know about that, but I do know that planning is a mark of one who is a good leader. I think women can be naturally better teachers at certain subjects than men. I will not say all, but I do believe there's enough there that this should be recognized. She is industrious, prudent, wise, and understanding, compassionate, kind, trustworthy, and is more visible both physically and in today's world with the internet. SMV, sexual market value. I want to say that too many people put emphasis on the outward appearance and either don't know or avoid the inner qualities of a man and a woman. A lot of these characteristics and qualities can overlap from one to the other, but with the way men and women are, I want to say that certain characteristics are going to be more strongly in one sex versus the other. Now, when it comes down to those who are transitioning, their base biology has to be taken into account, but everything else may end up changing. With what happened to me on a personal level, where my foundation got shorn up in half, basically tore in half, and I had to replace it. The unique thing that I noticed there is after the healing starts and the trauma has been dealt with, because those are two separate things, you can adapt and change because you are more flexible after being broken. Being broken is not the end. You merely change from one to the other, like in a way a cracker does. I think some people, when they break, they think it's the end and that's it, there's nothing left, and they just give up. They don't see the hope, they don't see the plan, the future, they don't see anything. Either way, I want to point out that there's more here if you would only look and ask questions. All right, that basically is it. The differences can be boiled down to men are more logical, analytical, and rational, while women are more intuitive, holistic, creative, and social, and integrative. So while men have a more difficult time relating to others with their own feelings, or even just acknowledging them, they may also feel more threatened by the expression of feelings in their presence as well. It's something that some men are more born with they're able to acknowledge feelings and emotions more than other men, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, except when they're trying to like kick stuff under the carpet or hide it in the closet, so to speak, where they don't deal with it. It's not even acknowledged, and then that's damaging because they're letting something from their past, from their own issues, get between them and living and enjoying their life, so to speak. You know what? Some men may want that, so yeah. But anyway, men should also be more responsible due to their gifts and traits and abilities. This is not necessarily tied to being a leader, though. I think, all in all, at the very end here, the leadership position is one that should not ever be taken lightly or approached just simply on a whim. It should be It should be its own field of study. That there's a lot here that can be looked into, that should be looked into before you ever take any steps down, trying to to be the leader that you want to be. It's not simply a overnight process. Like, this takes years. There's a lot that excuse me. There's a lot to apply to being a leader, that just time and maturity and a little bit of conflict will be needed in order to fully understand what a leader is. Now, a leader will also be seen very differently for pretty much everyone. It can be defined the same way, but it will be seen differently. As you can see, this is a very difficult topic to simply do research on, because there is a lot that ties into it. I will not be doing any more videos where I simply say, hey, I will be doing this next and this next and this next. I won't be doing that, because there are some topics that may take a very long time for me to do research on, that I initially thought I knew a lot about, that I could talk on. And then when I approached it, I realized I need to do more research. I need to look into this stuff more. So I will not be doing this kind of video again. Now, if I do, I will most likely address it beforehand and say that, hey, I know a lot about this already. I did a little bit of research just to brush up on what I know. Here are some more examples, and you get the idea. But as it is, I have a whole slew of topics to talk about here that I feel gets put off to the side in favor of, hey, this is next on the list, I'm going to do it. And then a whole month later, and I'm specifically referring back to the 3-part topic on marriage, sex, and alternative relationships, because that one took me forever. And in the meantime, I came across a whole other bunch of topics that I want to talk about, but I just could not do it because I had so much in my life already. That takes away from what I can do, the videos that I can make, and the topics that can be briefly talked about. All right, until next time.